Hello. Welcome to Unboxing Sci Comm. I'm Jamie Gallagher. Thank you for joining us. There's lots of people watching, which is fantastic. I love to see it. Now, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitch, we're on Periscope. We would have been on LinkedIn and Facebook, but I'm not that organised. I think 3 channels, that's me doing pretty well. Also, as ever, trying new setups and always keen to know whether it's working, whether it's not. But mainly, I want to talk to you. Yes, I've got a guest, and that's great, but I want to say hello to everyone that's watching as well. Marika, hello! If you've come along to any of my training sessions, which maybe some of you have, there's quite a few people watching, you'll know that I start them off with one very particular question, and I thought I'd start off with that question for everyone here today. And the question I always start off my training sessions with is, what is a binge-worthy TV series you're currently making your way through? Put in the chat box. I want to know. I want to get you talking. I want more chat. Always more chat. We want lots of thoughts and questions as we go through the session, but for right now, what is the binge-worthy TV series you're currently watching? If you're unable to type, you might be watching on Periscope, in which case, join us on YouTube or something. Easier to comment. Hi, Josh. So I'm just going to watch the chat box and the answers will fly in. Now, we have a guest. That's kind of the purpose of this. I should introduce you to the format. Unboxing Sci Comm, discussing and dissecting the world of science communication, asking what the sector needs to learn and unlearn. So last week we had Robin Inns, this week we've got Neil Monteiro, and we're going to delve into the world of Sci Comm. Let's have a look. Oh, For All Mankind. I don't know it. I don't know that, Marika. If anyone cares, you probably don't, I'm watching Snowpiercer. Please watch Snowpiercer. I need people to talk to about it. It's ever so good. Hi Lisa, and hi Josh as well. So nice of you to join me. Let me sort this out. Bring comments up. Yay! Wave at Lisa and wave at Josh and everyone else that's watching, but staying quiet. I will check that out. I think I've got Apple TV. I don't know. Subscribe to everything. I watch a lot of TV. Anyway, let's get cracking. I thought the way to introduce my guest today would not be to try and give them a poor introduction, which I'm not good at introducing people. So it's really nice when you have a guest with a show reel. Today's guest, here's Neil.
So I'm here at the Hellas Heide Geothermal Power Plant. And while geothermal energy is a fantastic thing for Iceland, provides virtually free energy out of the heat of the earth, it's not all good news. When you start digging up all of that gas and actually, in this case, pumping it as water upwards, you actually bring with you a lot of other things. There's CO2, there's hydrogen sulfide, which is that stuff that really smells of bad eggs. It also brings up very trace minerals of things in the water itself, so arsenic and mercury amongst other things. Now those can be dealt with, they're pumped back underground with the rest of the water, but the CO2 and the hydrogen sulfide, they're both an issue because those are both greenhouse gases which need to be dealt with in one way. And what happened here at Hellas Heide is something very, very interesting. It's something called carbon capture and storage. Normal carbon capture.
And here he is, live in person, no stock footage used. It's Neil! Hello!
Hi.
What an introduction, that is smooth. I need a show reel. I want a show reel. You're so fancy.
You've pretty much doubled the viewership on my show reel just by putting it here now.
It's so slick. I love it. So I genuinely hate introducing people because I feel I never do them justice because people are complex. So who is Neil? Tell us who Neil is.
Yeah, I think maybe the show reel is a good example of that. That show reel exists just in case anybody out there wants to give me a job traveling around the world talking to a TV camera. It doesn't really, I suppose, reflect what I do most of the time in Sci Comm. Very much stage presenter, and the focus of a lot of my stage shows is on kind of more the methodology of science, like the thinking behind science. I would almost say the philosophy of science, but I think I might switch a lot of people off if they said that. So we'll just say, like, the method of science.
I don't know. The philosophy of Sci Comm sounds pretty good to me. Now, I'm gonna tell people a little secret. When we started talking about this, you said a horrific thing to me, a really terrible thing. You said that you would happily come on and talk about. I mean, it's upsetting to even say out loud about why you hate evaluation. I mean, we're going to get onto that. We will get onto that. And I know there's some evaluation fans. So Michaela's watching. Michaela, she's an evaluation fan. You're going to watch your language if you're going to talk about evaluation on this show.
Yeah.
So we will definitely get onto that. But let's
end my Sci Comm career now.
Yeah.
I didn't actually use the H word. I was more polite than that.
You were. We'll see how it goes when we actually get on to discussing evaluation. Michaela's saying ouch in the chat box there. But before we delve into that, so science on stage, that's kind of where you're at. How did that come about? Where did you find the kind of love of being on stage talking about science?
So I was an awful university student, and I spent most of my time in the drama society at university. And I had always had that kind of, I think like a lot of people do in Sci Comm, I'd always had that kind of dual interest in sciences and arts. So at the point when I was forced to do physics 100% of the time, obviously my mind went in another direction, and I started directing student theatre, and I loved it, and that kind of naturally led to a Sci Comm career for me. I was very lucky to be offered a job in university outreach at a point where it was expanding rapidly, very quickly, and they needed anybody. So so I got in. And
that's where we kind of cross paths, like at Science on Stage. Like you do lots of science festivals, lots of schools, things like that.
Yeah, and I think we're both big sci-fi geeks. So that yeah, I've looked at your Star Trek shows and similar, and it's like, yeah, that'd be good.
I've managed to fit in some as well. We've got an X-wing over my shoulder. Spock is behind me. There was an R2D2, but he fell. R2D2 is dead. Spock killed him in an odd twist of fate.
I was checking behind me. I'm not sure what is actually behind me.
Geek credentials out on show, always.
Cover it up. I did come into Sci Comm. I came into stage stuff because I had began to develop an interest in magic, so conjuring magic, and that kind of was the gateway for me, I suppose, to see science as something that could be done on a stage in a theatrical way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
it's probably something
I do look at other sectors and think there's so much that Sci Comm can learn from. So you look at a magician and the performance aspects of a magician, there's so much that you can learn, and different sectors all have their different advantages. So you've got this mix of kind of this interest in science, interest in magic, interest in performance and drama, and that all helps you.
Yeah, I used to think, and I don't think this so strongly anymore, but I used to think that you could just draw a complete parallel between performance of science and performance of magic, and there certainly is a parallel there in the presentation of a demo. Certainly, if you want there to be one, in the terms of the way you build it up, the way that the method is generally hidden, at least to begin with, and certainly some of the techniques that magicians use when they're thinking about magic, just generally, can be applied to Sci Comm. And some of the training that I've done in the past with teachers has basically just been that, it's teaching them magic presentation skills rather than anything that's specific to science. But that said, there are, I do believe now there are bigger differences than I originally thought between those two things. I went into Sci Comm, I mean, I've been doing about 8 years now as a freelancer, and I was working in a job in university outreach, and I left it because I wanted to do stage shows rather than do workshops and things, because I had this thing of like, right, I'm going to be the Darren Brown of Sci Comm. I'm going to do kind of mentalist type stuff to do with presentation of science, and I was wrong. That's not exactly, I think, the right way. I basically started doing stuff that didn't suit my personality. I think I was trying to
be Darren Brown.
Exactly, which I think everybody does, and there's nothing wrong with that in a lot of ways. At the beginning of your career, that you are going to imitate the people that you admire. I mean, I still have utmost admiration for Darren Brown's
or I digress, but I don't know if this is true for you, but I find that because I am fascinated by onstage performance and the way every movement, every gesture, every sound that you make is part of the performance, and so I watch people really, really closely, and I can subconsciously start emulating them. Now, it might be because you're into that mindset of kind of Darren Brown, but even, you know, I dread to bring him up, but there's so much Trump on the news, you can start absorbing some of what you see. And do you find that you start emulating people on stage and you kind of catch yourself and think, no, I'm Neil, I'm not that person?
I'm really relieved to hear you say that about Trump, actually, because I've caught myself doing that, and the occasional like Boris Johnsonism. I think some of it comes from my style, in that I tend to talk off the top of my head a bit more than some of the presenters might, and I find myself saying things like, "Oh, it's the most tremendous, the most amazing thing." And I'm like, "Oh no, what have I become?" So yeah, I do find myself doing that. Definitely definitely happens more. Like those things are kind of like minor unconscious copying, isn't it? But
yeah,
I definitely the stuff about people you admire, I think is actually more conscious. Like it was more of a deliberate attempt, not to rip off something, but to imitate. Yeah, deliberate attempt to imitate.
I love Josh saying in chat box that we all went through I want to be Darren Brown phrase, and Nikki's saying hello as well, so hello Nikki. Now, I do want to dive in with everyone into the slightly darker 2020 year, and I will say, as a science communicator, that's part of what I do, partly trainer, partly consultant, and part science communicator. Sci Comm for me in 2020 pretty much died. I have done very little. Now, I've worked a lot, and that's been training and doing lots of other things, but I found that for me, I've done very little science communication. How has your 2020 gone?
Yeah, a mix. I'd agree with you that the content of what I do isn't really direct science communication at the moment. I'm rarely talking to people directly. I don't think that's didn't have to be the case. I think it really depends on what kind of Sci Comm you did. So doing stage Sci Comm, you could convert to doing stuff live, to doing stuff online, but I never felt that I could do it very well, and I would rather do something else than do a stage show badly online. So I've stayed away from it. I don't think I've done a single one. And I was lucky early on, in March when things hit, I kind of got organised quickly, and I just messaged a lot of people that I'd worked for before and said, by the way, I do lots of like web stuff and video stuff. Would you like me to produce something? And enough previous clients came back to me and had work that kept me going for a while. But it's not been great. I mean, I went through a long phase, hasn't really stopped. Starting in early summer, I just kind of went, this is all just too much. And I really enjoyed a career before that of traveling and being away all the time, and that I don't think I'd appreciate how much that sustains me. Mm-hmm. So I got to a point where I had work available, and I just got up every day and just couldn't face it. So yeah, I had a pretty dark 2020, and I think I can see some of the light at the other end of that now, and part of that is from the fact that I think we're getting out of the situation, and some of the live work and just the work with people is coming back. But at the same time, I have changed the direction of some of the Sci Comm that I want to do. So yeah, over the last year, it's really made me think, how much live stuff, what breadth of live stuff do I really want to manage? And so I'm pretty much going to go down to, I think, one stage show which is aimed at adults and teens, and one stage show which is for schools, and that'll be it.
You can book them now. That's just for people watching. Just saying, like he's developing a new show. You want someone with a show reel as slick as Neil's.
I think it might take a while before some of that stuff is ready. I think the pandemic is like, for some of us, amongst all the other things it's done, it is the great reset. If no one's been doing live shows, not on stage, not in most places for the last year. So if you're going to go back to it, that for me, that feels like that's now a conscious choice. That is, yes, I like doing that, so I'm going to do it. Not, well, I've been doing that for 6 years, and I've got to pay my rent next month, so I guess I'm going to keep accepting these work. Now you're choosing to do it properly, knowing what you're getting into.
And I don't know you, but it's a little scary as well. Like a year of not being on stage, the idea of kind of like, oh right, get into the mindset of doing a new show and having demos and having props. After a year, it's starting to feel a little alien to me.
Yep. I agree. Well, just talking to you today was pretty nerve-wracking because I'm not used to having more than one person, the very most on the end of a video chat. So the idea there's other people watching is...
and they are watching and they're saying hello, so do carry on chatting away to us. If you've got questions for Neil about the world of Sci Comm and being on stage, just put them in the chat box as well. We're happy to take questions from people that are watching at home. I say watching at home. Where else are you going to be watching it? And honestly, where else are you going to be? Anyway, oh yeah, of course, the director of Cheltenham Science Festival telling us both it's like riding a bike. That's no coincidence. I'll get that stuff over to you very, very soon, Marika. Sort of little deadline reminder there.
You were saying about what's different about this year. I think because of the particular type of science communication that I've been interested in, which is about the thinking of science stuff. It has focused my mind a bit more in that way too. That the stuff that is, how do you make someone generally scientifically literate? How do you encourage somebody to think about science in every aspect of their life rather than particular parts of science? It's focused my mind a lot more on wanting to do something around that. I mean, I already did, but the day-to-day of Sci Comm is being pulled one way or another by a booking that wants one thing or something else, and so yeah, I think the aspects of the pandemic that have brought anti-science in have been interesting.
Oh, I'm going to mute Neil for a second. We've got a little bit of interference and you're lagging out, but we're able to hear everything you said. I'll unmute you now. I think we're back to normal. I think even phrasing it in the way of kind of the Great Reset is interesting. In the chat box, just want to touch on, James is saying, is it just me that misses sitting on a train? I'm going to go yes, James. I'm going to say yes, just you. Michaela's agreeing as well. Like, I think, James, you're on your own with that one. But those times, I'm sure, are returning soon. Now, I do want to turn to, as I said, evaluation. I'll say in the chat box, let's go for a love or hate. Evaluation in one word, love or hate. What do you think? Put in the chat box just now, because obviously Neil and I might be on different sides of this argument. Or maybe we're not, but we'll find out. Love or hate evaluation, put in the chat box, let us know. So let's turn on to that topic. And the reason this came up was I'm looking for people to think about what the sector needs to learn, what the sector needs to unlearn. And you think there's a little bit of an issue around the way we currently deal with evaluation. What do you like or dislike about it?
So this is a big topic, and I don't mean it to sound like I don't think we should have any kind of form of evaluation of what we do. But there are some pitfalls, maybe the way to put it, that we should watch out for. And there's really kind of two aspects to the way that I feel about this. One is on the more kind of professional side of things. So is evaluation good for Sci Comm as a profession? And the other is what is its role with the philosophy of Sci Comm? You said you wanted to talk about the philosophy of Sci Comm. There we go. So I think on the first side, I'm a freelance presenter. So in a way, you get the simplest of worlds when it comes to developing Sci Comm. You come up with a great idea, you get to practice it in a few places, you write it, maybe not in that order, and somebody gives you some money, and then you go home. And occasionally I've been involved in bidding for money, but rarely. It's not a big part of what I do. But I'm aware that for those people who are involved in more of the money side of things, that there's a lot of pressure to evidence why you've chosen one thing and whether it's worked or not. And I think like I said, there's a professional argument about this, and there's a philosophical one. So to separate them for a minute, just think about the professional side of things. The problems for me are mainly around the value for money of it, and the way that it professionalizes us. Right. So professionalizing sounds like it should always be a positive thing, but it isn't necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done a few projects in the last couple of years, which are for bigger organizations where there's big pots of money around. It's longer bits of work. You're going to test things. You're going to, things will be available publicly afterwards. And the evaluation on, and I don't want to name names here or, projects, but at least a couple of those cases, the evaluation budget has been the same as the budget for the activity. And I think there you've got to say, well, there's kind of a problem, because unless that evaluation is providing you with some sort of tangible value, I think the split of 50-50 is really questionable. I mean, some money to do it, yes, that makes sense, but that much? And why I worry about that is because of so I think I have perhaps a little more experience with the arts than the average Sci Commer would, and I'm aware of how much money is in Sci Comm. Yeah. So if you're going to be an art, someone that does even just educational workshops, but certainly with stage shows and video work, there is not that much money floating around in other sectors, and there's enough here that it will attract people to come into the science communication sector, because this is where the paid work is. And that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right fit for us. So we should be we have to be on our guard that people who come in and say that they can do all these different things via evaluation, they are going to flood in because of just how much money is in Sci Comm. I don't think we appreciate that enough, because we think of ourselves as Sci Commers as being, at the poor end of, certainly what the other science graduates who will go on to work in the city or whatever. But the reality is that as an artistic area, which it is frequently, it is awash with cash.
Yeah, I'll just point out, I am an evaluation consultant. I'm quite cheap. I do want to look at some of the comments in the chat box as well, because when I asked, do we love or hate evaluation? Interesting response. Interesting in that it is hate universally, apart from Michaela. So I'm thinking that there's a bit of evaluation love coming from central university people, and maybe less from the practitioners. And one thing I'll say, as an evaluation consultant as well, this is something that struck me when I ran a session with, I brought Steve Mould, Matt Parker and Helen Arney into the university to run a session on science communication for the researchers. And they were curious about kind of markers of success. And what was interesting was these are actually very different worlds. Public engagement and Sci Comm, for a professional science communicator, can have very different markers of success. Public engagement, you're reporting to universities, you're having to show a demonstrable change in attitude, behaviour. For a successful science communicator, sometimes applause and a repeat booking and a happy organiser, that is your marker of success. And so to go in and survey everyone, that might actually interfere with the overall process. So I get what you're saying, and I think evaluation, and Lisa said, is being used as a stick to beat people with as well. And I think there is a worry that evaluation becomes something that must be done, and it must always be done, and it must be the reason in why you do Sci Comm. Is that kind of your worry, that it kind of almost eclipses all of the good?
I think we have to be aware of where the pressures come from. So in most cases, it's whoever the ultimate funder is putting the pressure on. And sometimes that is imagined. You could be working for a foundation who feel that they have to put some proof into how what they have done has worked. And if that pressure is not necessarily going to improve what you're doing, then over time it increases the cost of Sci Comm, right? So I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make here. That, and in my personal experience, but I'm sure other people would agree, if your budget, the more your budget includes money for evaluation, unless that evaluation is actually providing some tangible value, it's putting up the cost of your Sci Comm that you're doing, and therefore going to reduce the amount that's going to happen overall, because it's going to make everybody's slices bigger in the same pot.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I would also, on the professional side of things, we do want to point out that a lot of people who are in Sci Comm as presenters or as people that make workshops would have considered a job in teaching. And I actually, my first 2 years after university, I was in teaching and didn't stay in teaching because of the culture of evidencing that has become so prevalent. If you do teacher training, you're mainly learning, how do I evidence what I've done? There's an enormous amount of a teacher's time is not teaching, it's proving that you have taught, even though you've already done it. And that, whether you agree with that or not, it definitely puts off a lot of people who then go into Sci Comm instead. So if our, I don't want to call it an industry, but if our sector becomes more and more used to the idea of evidencing and evaluation as just a necessity, as a staple, then we will become more bureaucratic, we'll become more expensive, and will only attract people who don't mind bureaucracy. And while I didn't use the H word with evaluation, you definitely should hate bureaucracy, right?
I think we all do. I like Michaela saying about her being lucky because she's in a position where evaluation is done as worthwhile. And I think one thing that I worry about is, as a science communicator, let's say someone sponsors you to do a show. When you're evaluating, you're not actually evaluating to really learn and critically analyse what it is you're doing. You are evaluating to please the funder. And if you don't please the funder, that's a problem. And so, Michaela's saying she gets to evaluate in a way that she actually gets to reflect and learn. And that can be a beautiful thing. But when it becomes this very procedural, as you said, it becomes pointless and it interferes with the process.
We have one word here for two different things, right? So there is, everybody on stage should be evaluating themselves. I probably don't use the word evaluate, it's more kind of, just being my own critic. I find it very hard to film myself on stage and watch myself back, but I do occasionally. But I'm certainly, there's half, everybody's been on stage, so it's like, once you've done something enough times, your brain will be doing one thing at the top, and on the lower layer underneath, you'll be thinking about what you're doing, evaluating yourself. And yeah, that process should be happening all the time, for sure. And it is distinct from the other element of pleasing the funder. And ultimately, if you're doing evaluation just to please the funder, you go far enough down this line, the funder's not going to be pleased because suddenly their thing is going to cost more money than it used to. I saw James Piercy saying about the problem with the aims of evaluation, like if you're not clear about them, and I think that is related. Yes, that's the comment. That's related to maybe the second point that I had on it, and if we have time, I'd like to mention.
Yeah, it's not TV. You can have as long as you like. Delve in.
Well, as long as people stay. So
we'll overrun by 5 minutes.
The other reason why I think we have to be cautious about the role of evaluation in science communication is that it generally involves a separate academic discipline to science. Right? So the vast majority of science communication practitioners have come from a science background. Right? But when we do evaluation, although there's an increasing number of, I think, people who have presented Sci Comm going into evaluation, originally a lot of that training came from people who came from the social sciences to do that training. And actually still a lot of, I think, evaluation, I think, is done by people who are based in that. And I mentioned earlier, I think I'm more exposed to the art scene than a lot of people have. In fact, I've been fairly embedded in like the not embedded is not the right word, but I've had a lot more exposure to kind of the experimental art scene in the last few years. It's become part of my social group, and I have come to learn a lot more about the very different underlying philosophies between natural sciences and social sciences that not many of us would learn about in other contexts. And I think we need to be somewhat guarded about the claims that can be made by, I would say social scientists, but I think it's a broader group of people, about what can and cannot be achieved. And I think there's a tendency for those of us who come from a science background to assume the best of that discipline.
Yeah.
And I think that discipline as a whole, yeah, and this is sounding like pretty harsh, but as a whole has overreached on what it can achieve and what it can state with certainty.
I'm very well put there, and I'm just keep reading the comments coming in the chat box as well, and we're obviously hitting on a topic that people have a lot of strong feelings about, me included, and you know, as someone who physical sciences background, as I move deeper and deeper into evaluation, I read textbooks on social science. It is completely a social science, and there is so much knowledge that needs to go alongside it. So I think there's certainly overlap in our views. We're not polar opposites on evaluation. It has a place. It needs to be done thoughtfully. It needs to be done professionally. It doesn't necessarily need done every single event at every single festival, always and forever. And
No, it doesn't need to always involve an academic in that area. So I think you can see the encroachment. I mentioned earlier about how much money there is in Sci Comm, and there is a lot compared to other areas that are similar. And
don't tell the secrets.
We're
We're all impoverished. There's no work. We want more money. More money. We need more money.
It's a relative thing, right? But relative to other similar areas, there is a lot of money in Sci Comm. And I think that I can think of a couple of academics off of my head who have managed to make careers out of doing working in Sci Comm, even though their background is not in science, and because they're working around impact assessment and evaluation and some of the other areas. And actually, I think that is problematic. I remember meeting some of the students on the master's course at UWE, and a couple of them had come off, natural science backgrounds in chemistry and biology. One of them was telling me about how he, started this course, and they get you to read Thomas Kuhn to start off with, the Structure of Scientific Revolutions, which is like that's 101 Sci Comm, academic Sci Comm is to read that. So, and he used this phrase with me, which was, it was like, he basically said, science actually doesn't have all the answers, which is one of my favorite features, one of my favorite Darrow O'Brien sketches. And he said, science is a social construct. Now, this is a term that comes out of some of the most extreme form of social sciences. And I think, again, if you move from a science degree, which is generally pretty staid, into an area like social sciences, you may not be critical about what you're being taught. I know I wasn't when I first started learning about some of these things. And I would push back an awful lot on a lot of the content of those courses and the validity of it. And that I don't think it's presented in a critical enough way. So we end up, the academic side of Sci Comm, as opposed to the practitioning side, is from a vastly different philosophical underpinning. The part of, certainly Thomas Kuhn obviously started as a scientist, became a historian of science. But there are other people involved, and I've talked before about Michel Foucault and some of his thoughts on science. I mean, his outright anti-science. This is a lot of those philosophies are the root of some of the anti-science that we see in society today, and yet some of the people that we are training to go out and communicate science are being given that and presented those thoughts as fact. And I find that very, the two don't seem to, they should be fitting together.
And this exactly is why you do philosophy of science on a stage.
Well, I don't want to claim that I am a philosopher of science, because my interest is, it's not, I use it in my profession, but it's not professional.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up there anyway. And I think saying science does not have all the answers, and Neither do we, but it's been really, really great speaking to you, Neil. And if you want more information about Neil and his upcoming projects, if you check down below, you'll see links to Neil's YouTube page and also to his homepage as well. You can find out a little bit more about what he is getting up to. But for now, I'll say, Neil, thank you very much for joining me on Unboxing Sci Comm, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks.
And thank you to all of you who joined me, who were chatting along the whole time. Thank you very much. The chat was great today because lots of expertise and knowledge in the room. It's nice to see you all talking to each other because we're a friendly bunch in the Sci Comm sector. Next week, I will be back at the same time with Sally the Plage, famous YouTuber. She can probably tell me a thing or two about live streaming on YouTube. So make sure you come along at 3 p.m. next Friday, where we'll be diving into the social media and YouTube side of Sci Comm and asking a professional YouTuber what makes good Sci Comm on YouTube. But for now, I'll say thank you again for joining me, joining in the chat. I will see you again next week. Goodbye.